And Chairman, I very much appreciate your time. Obviously, so many things to ask. I do want to start with former President Trump's response today to the video. You showed a video last night, a clip of his daughter, Ivanka, and clearly she accepted the election results. And the former president today said that Ivanka, quote, was not involved and had long since checked out. Does his response and what he's saying change anything for you?
No, it doesn't. And by the way, thank you for having me. We have proof about Ivanka's participation with her daddy on a regular basis about what was going on. On January 6th, she was there in the White House. And so, what or who better could have access to what was going on than one's own daughter? And for him to somehow insinuate that his daughter had checked out is disingenuous on his part as a father. Daughters normally know what their fathers are doing, especially when there's a close relationship.
So, as you say, you've got the proof that she was involved in briefing him on those election results. I want to also ask you about something Jessica mentioned, of course, these far-right extremist groups, the extent to which this is pre-planned, which I know, Chairman Thompson, is core to the entire story that you are telling this country. Last night, you told my colleague Jake Tapper that you have witnesses that will describe conversations between members of the extremist groups. I'm talking about the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. Conversations between those groups and people in the former President Trump's orbit. What were those conversations about? Were they specific on the planning?
Well, the planning centered primarily around coming to Washington, showing their support for the president, and based on that engagement, they came. They came in large numbers, as you saw in the video presentation. Not only did they set up outside of Washington, but for the most part, some of them brought weapons, some brought tear gas, bear spray, a lot of things that is not the normal things you bring to a rally or demonstration. But they brought Kevlar vests and other things as if they were prepared for war. But more importantly, they did not even go to the rally. They went to the Capitol. And the video demonstrated all of that. But our hearing will share the other names of the other individuals who were talking to the Proud Boys. Some of the video you saw them meeting as a group with other Oath Keepers and others on the 5th. So there's a lot of sharing of information that we will provide the public with during our next 6 hearings that will even crystallize more in the minds of the public as to what the Trump administration did to create the narrative for January 6th.
So, I know you're going to be revealing a lot of these names, but to understand where you're going with this, we know a top member of the Oath Keepers said in court that the leader of the Oath Keepers had tried to get in touch with Trump on January 6th. And the Oath Keepers leader, according to this testimony, spoke on the phone to an unidentified person who was close to Trump. Now, this person did not connect the leader of the Oath Keepers to the president in this conversation, as we understand it. My question for you, Chairman Thompson, is how close was this person to Trump? And, was this a core inner circle person having a conversation with a leader of the Oath Keepers?
Well, just let me say that in our investigation, we found close relationship with those extremist elements in the country, especially the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. I don't want to give up all of what we have. You just have to follow us during the hearing.
Yes.
But everything we present we will be able to verify. If there's anyone who disagrees with what we present, all they have to do is come before the committee, take it, we'll swear them, put them under oath, and they can talk. That's from the president on down. So we welcome anyone who disagrees with any evidence we present in our findings to just come to the committee, and we will gladly entertain them.
So, Chairman, I guess at the core of this, and there's so many levels. Obviously, if the president had not questioned the election, said it was rigged and fraudulent, none of these people would have ever been there to begin with, right? So, if you look at responsibility in a very simple way, you've long ago established. One did not even need a committee to establish that level of responsibility. But when it comes to these specific conversations, are you going to be presenting the President of the United States himself, President Trump at that time, having any specific conversations with any of these individuals?
Well, not the president, as far as we've been able to find, but there are people, as I said, in his orbit that have engaged these groups all along. So we will be able to present certain information around that. But as to whether or not he was briefed on what they were doing, we won't go that far. But it's inconceivable that you would invite people to Washington on January 6th and tell them it will be wild. As you heard in the video presentation, that was kind of a call to arms for a lot of the radical right-wing element in this country. And so the president is notorious for sending certain messages. And it was clear in that going to be wild tweet exactly what he shared with the entire public. So our job over the next 6 hearings is to tell this story. We will grow the picture of him being told by responsible individuals that the election was not stolen. They had not found any impropriety at all in terms of the conduct. In most of the areas, most of the officials were Republican. And still, he refused to accept his data person, his campaign manager, his chief law enforcement official, because he kept pushing this false narrative on the public. He spent money pushing this false narrative. He raised money to push this false narrative. And what we'll show in one of our hearings as to how much money he really raised, but how little he really spent.
That he did not put his money where his mouth is, as you're saying. I almost hesitate to ask this question to you, Chairman, because obviously the facts show that what he said happened with the election didn't happen, and he was told it repeatedly by everyone around him. So any stable, sane individual, should be able to look at the sky and say, okay, I know I've been saying it's green, but I get the joke. I know it's not green. But I have to ask you, do you have the proof that he did know that this was all a lie? That he knew it was all BS, even as he spread it?
Well, the only thing we have is the firsthand testimony of different witnesses from, as I said, his own attorney general, the election officials who he hired to run his campaign. Those are his trusted advisors. And if these are the people you hire to advise you, and they give you their professional advice that you've lost the election, why would you go to that rump group of Giuliani, Powell, and others who really are just along for the ride and start following them rather than the people you've been working with all along? And so even when you started going to court, you went to court over 60 times and you lost. And so at some point in America, when you lose an election, and I tried to show that in the time of the Civil War, President Lincoln was faced with a similar situation, and he rallied the country rather than divide the country and said, if I lose, we will cooperate with the winner. Donald Trump is the only president in the history of the United States not to cooperate in the peaceful transition of power.